was a scheduling conflict, but we're back here today. Thank God. Today is Thursday. We'll continue, God willing, next week on Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Newfoundland time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. So today's class is about the counting of the Omer, Sfiras Omer, which is a very special mitzvah that we are doing right now. We started the second night of Pesach, the second night of Passover. We started counting the Omer. So we're going to speak about what that's all about. So right now we are counting every night, as long as you didn't miss a night. Better said, as long as you didn't miss a full day of counting, you count every night with a blessing. So we started the second night of Pesach. That was night number 1. And we count until number 49. And the 49th night is the night of the eve of Shavuot, Erev Shavuot, before we celebrate Shavuot, which commemorates when the Jews got the Torah on Mount Sinai, the 6th of Sivan, 6th day of the Hebrew month of Sivan. So that is actually the next major Jewish holiday, Shavuot, Shavuos, on the 6th, 7th of Sivan, the Hebrew calendar, coinciding this year with June the 2nd and the 3rd. So it begins June 1st at night, Sunday night, until Tuesday night, June the 3rd. So, all about the counting of the Omer. Because, according to many customs, after you make the blessing for the counting of the Omer, you say which day of the Omer it is. We also add in our prayer, we mention a different sphere, a different emotional attribute that we're working on. Right? So there's 49 days and there's 7 emotional attributes. So it's 7 times 7. Each week we work on a different attribute, how this attribute is comprised of all the other 7. For example, we're going to speak about it also towards the end of the class, but the first attribute we work on is chesed, kindness. So the first night is kindness within kindness. Then the second night is severity within kindness. And then is mercy within kindness. And so on and so forth. Then the second week is severity within kindness, severity of severity, and so on and so forth. So here we go. Story goes as follows. The Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, the Chabad dynasty, had a very particular follower, Shmuel Munkes, what's his name? And he had a very particular sense of humor, and he would do unusual things to bring out powerful insights or aphorisms. And one time the Alter Rebbe had to travel for an important meeting with other Rebbes, and the Shmuel Munkes wanted to tag along for the spiritual opportunity to meet these other holy Jews. The Alter Rebbe, of course, was quite concerned because he didn't know what Shmuel Munkes was going to come up with type of shtick he was going to do that others wouldn't appreciate. But Shmuel Munkes makes a deal. He agrees he will not do any shtick. He won't do any monkey business. He's going to behave. So the Alter Rebbe takes him along. They're eating everybody together Shabbat morning. The Alter Rebbe, Shmuel Munkes, the other Rebbes. And the waiter goes around offering different types of kugel. There's potato kugel, Yerushalmi kugel, salt and pepper kugel, all types of kugels. So the waiter's asking everybody, which type of kugel do you want? Until he gets to Rav Shmuel Munkes. And when Rav Shmuel Munkes gets asked which type of kugel he likes, his eyes go like this, and everybody stops. Everybody sees something is about to happen. And Shmuel Munkes screams and says, "What? Which type of kugel I like? Kugel I eat. Kugel I don't like. What I love is God." That's the story, right? He was saying, we eat because we have to. I don't like it. I don't love it. What I love is the Almighty God. What happens is that we listen to such a story and we say, okay, great story, interesting, but how does that relate to me? How can I relate to that? I enjoy food, and I mean that personally. I enjoy eating cake very much. So how can I relate to such a story that this Hasidic Jew says he doesn't like food? If we're honest with ourselves, it's not just that we love food, we love ourselves. We love to have a good time, enjoy ourselves, as the saying goes. So can we learn anything from this story? Can we reach a level that could change what we love, what we like, to be happy when we do a mitzvah, to be happy when we give tzedakah, charity, and to do it with the same gusto, with the same zest that we enjoy ourselves, with the same zest that we go on vacation, with the same zest that we eat when we buy an electronic that we really want, iPhone. Can we spend money on a mitzvah, for example, tefillin, with the same joy we spend money on furnishing our house, on renovating our house? In other words, is there a chance? Is it possible? Is it even possible that Kedusha, sanctity, Judaism will have such an important place in my life, the same as I gave importance and precedence to my material needs? Needs being a big word. Or even material wants. There comes a point in our lives that we say, well, what I'm doing is not as important as why I'm doing it, right? Why do I enjoy doing some things? Why don't I like doing other things? And during the counting of the Omer, we have this unique opportunity to tap into our feelings, the emotional fuse box, what really sets the tone for our lives, what directs our lives, what drives our lives. And yes, I could learn how to love things other than food and material things. I can also stop loving people who are toxic in my life, toxic relationships. I can distance myself from things which are not good for me. Everybody wants and dreams of love at first sight. But love is not only spontaneous. Love is also something you could develop. Yet, who are we right now? Before we go through the process of the Omer, before we listen to this class, who are we? Who am I? We enjoy a good piece of cake, a good steak, a good cup of wine. How about the negative emotions that drive our lives? Anxiety, fear, worries, feeling depressed, not clinically depressed. That's something else. But things that put us down. Can we really change? Absolutely. The answer is yes, a resounding yes. That is the midst of counting the Omer. And we need to address not just what we do, but why we do it. The counting of the Omer begins after we celebrate the first night of Passover, Pesach. What happened then? We left Egypt. The Jews had to run away. Why? Because they were so contaminated with idolatry, with the not vulgarity, but with the not just promiscuity, but with the low moral values of Egypt, that we had to run away. Just like an addict, that step number one is throw away the addiction, whatever it is, drugs, alcohol, etc. First thing is, throw away the bottle. Now, step number two is the step of refinement, which is the counting of the Omer, allowing us to love what we do. At the beginning, we have to run away from Egypt, but you cannot run away from yourself. You have to cut off, get rid of the toxic parts, negative parts, bad parts, and then have to work on refining yourself. Right? Like first you run away from evil, and then you focus on doing good, on filling yourself with light. And we see that from the Jews running away from Egypt until they got the Torah Mount Sinai 49 days later, the days in between, which is when we come to Omer, allow them to then accept the Torah willingly, with happiness, with intent, with zest. And they said, Naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. Right? They committed to the Torah before they knew what it entailed. They signed the contract before reading it. And this is something that stands for us forever, this merit that the Jews signed up for the Torah before knowing fully what it said, because they said we love God and God wants what's good for us. It doesn't matter what it says. Those are the details. We want to enter into the relationship. We're going to ask a number of questions now on counting the Omer. And we're going to see that it's very, very hard to understand this mitzvah fully without Kabbalah and Hasidic thought. Right? Kabbalah is Jewish mystical thought. So, Spheres Omer, the counting of the Omer, allows us to make an emotional diagnosis to shine the light of the soul into the emotions and say, what am I holding, right? As we said at the beginning. What do I love? Where is my chesed, my kindness directed? Also, what makes me angry? Makes me angry that the glory of God does not fill the earth? Or it makes me angry that somebody stepped on my toe? For example, Netzach, it's another one of the emotional attributes. Literally, Netzach means victory, means perseverance. Hoid means self-abnegation or surrender. Who do I put myself to the side for? To a wealthy guy or to somebody who's studied a lot of Torah, right? What are my priorities in my life? So there's three things that we see from the teachings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe about really changing our emotions, dealing with fear, with anxieties, with stress, lack of patience, anger. And there's three things. Number one, studying about it, studying the sources in Hasidic thought, in Kabbalah, about the power of emotions, why it's important. Number two, to set small goals. And number three, to keep track of your success. So you don't get despondent. And you can look back and say, all the work that I've done is leading me somewhere. Maybe it's slower than I wished. Maybe it's taking longer than I wanted. But we're getting there. We're getting somewhere. Now, this mitzvah is unique because it's related to three mitzvahs in total. There's the bringing of the Omer offering, which was comprised of barley. Very unusual. Only two offerings are comprised of barley. One being this one, the Omer, and the other one being the Mincha offering of a Soita, married woman suspected of adultery. But let's go back to our discussion about the Omer. So the Omer was brought in temple times the second day of Passover. In the land of Israel, the Yom Tov days when no work is allowed is only the first day and the seventh day. In the diaspora, we also have the second day and the eighth day. So again, in Israel, temple times, the second day of Passover, when it's not Yom Tov anymore, it's the intermediary days that would offer the Omer, which is comprised of barley. Then there's the counting of the Omer, that we count from the day the Omer is offered, right, from the second day of Passover. And that culminates with the offering of the Shtei Halechem, the two special loaves of bread on Shavuot, which came from the new grain. I have to give a lot of background information, so we'll skip this part for now, but the new grain and the old grain, just follow me for a minute. The way the agricultural cycle works is that what ripens first is the wheat and then the barley. The farmers, they waited the whole year, they prayed the whole year, there should be a good year, it should be rain, the crops should grow, and they want to harvest their grain. But the Torah says no, there is an order. And on the eve of Pesach, or Pesach, they would harvest the new barley for the Omer, and it will be offered in the temple on the second day of Pesach. They will wave it in front of the altar, the Mizbeach. And again, this is important because this allowed the new grain to be consumed. And then we begin counting. This is the only offering that's connected with counting. No other offering do we count. And here we're counting a total of 49 days. And after the 49 days, we use the wheat, right? So the farmers had to hold on for using the wheat for temple offerings until Shavuot. Now, as we were saying, it's very unusual to have an offering from barley. Usually offerings, a korban mincha, a flour offering, comes from wheat. It has to be from wheat. So why is this one from barley? And the answer is that barley is food that's usually fed to an animal. So during this time between Pesach and Shavuot, when we're working on our emotions, we're working on our animalistic impulses, our animalistic soul, the Nefesh Bahamis, it's the offerings made from barley. Excuse me. Which is why the other offering that's brought from barley is the minchas saita, the flour, the barley flour brought by the lady who's suspected of adultery. The Talmud says, just as she acted in an animalistic way, like an animal, bringing herself to suspicion of adultery, her offering is the food of an animal. Okay. Looking at my notes here. The Medrash tells us an interesting parable to illustrate what was happening spiritually for the Jewish people from Exodus from Egypt, Passover, until the giving of the Torah and the counting in between. Because even though the actual mitzvah of counting the Omer they received after the first period of time, right after the original Passover, the Jews were counting because they were so excited to receive the Torah that they were counting towards it. So the Medrash says as follows. The Medrash says that there was a king that was walking around in his palace, in his kingdom, and he notices, he sees a new guy who's thrown into jail, and he speaks to this new inmate, and he falls in love with this guy. He says, this guy has a head on his shoulders, great conversationalist. And after a few months of chatting with the guy and having very wonderful conversations, they speak about Carney and all that stuff, the tariffs. So after a few months, the king promises two things to this guy. The number one, I'll take you out of jail. And number two, 50 days after I take you out of jail, I'm gonna marry my daughter off to you. So the king goes to his word, he takes the guy out of jail. Once the guy is out of jail, he begins to count the 50 days to the marriage with the princess, the king's daughter. So Moses came to Jewish people, right? And he had told them two things when they were still in Egypt. Number one, God, the king of the world, is going to take you out of Egypt. And promise number two, 50 days later, he's going to bring you to the Mount Sinai, Har Sinai, and you will serve God there, you will get the Torah. But the Jews didn't believe Moses. Then came the Exodus. The doors of Egypt opened, right? Before that, no servant was able to escape Egypt, the Iron Curtain. So the doors opened, the Jews left through the hand of God, led by Moses. But why do we count towards the giving of the Torah instead of backwards? When you're excited about something, counting to your wedding, counting to a celebration, a milestone, the end of school, you count backwards, 49, 48, 47. Here we count to the giving of the Torah from the offering of the Omer. Why? Why do we count upwards instead of back? Also, as a side point, the last day of counting the Omer is not intrinsically connected with the holiday of Shavuot. What does that mean practically? Today, when we have a fixed calendar, Shavuot always falls on the 6th of Sivan, and the diaspora we also have the 7th of Sivan. Okay, in the Hebrew calendar. Before our calendar was set by a calculation, and it was set by the witnesses signing the new moon, the months beforehand could have 29 days or 30 days, right? It's a lunar cycle. And it could fall out that Shavuot, that the end of the counting of the 49 days from Passover would end not on the day when the Torah was originally given. It would still celebrate the holiday, but it would not be on the same day the Torah was given the first day. Why is that important? It's important today because if a person crosses the international date line, they can have continued counting their own counting of the Omer, how they began, regardless of how the local community does. This happens very often. People travel to or from Australia, right? Depends on how you fly to Australia. If you cross international date line, you lose a day, gain a day. You have to continue counting the way you were. And it could come out that you celebrate Shavuot on a different day than the local community. Side point. If this happens to you, consult your competent local Orthodox rabbi. Okay. Also, interestingly, the Omer is the only mitzvah that's one big block, according to some opinions. And that is that if a person misses a day of counting, he cannot continue counting with a blessing, which is unusual. Especially since we know it's, we say it's never too late. So a person comes to put on tefillin, they say, well, where were you until now? You cannot put on tefillin because you missed on putting on tefillin for, I don't know, even a day. But let's say it's many years. If all the more so, forget it, you're done. You lost that. We never say that. No other mitzvah we say you have to do ta 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 ta, and then if you don't, you miss the boat. We never say that. The Omer is the exception. Question number 4. This is connected to how we started, and that is that according to most customs, we do mention the sphera, the emotional attribute of the day, even for those communities that usually don't study Kabbalah, which is interesting. And then number 5, that the counting of the Omer, we do not say Shehechianu. Usually we have a mitzvah that comes from time to time, Lizman. We make the Shehechianu blessing, thanking God that we were able to reach this occasion once again. Blowing of the shofar Rosh Hashanah. The day of Yom Kippur, make Shehechianu. When we make Kiddush on a holiday, for example. But not when we come to Omer. So, counting of the Omer is the way that we diagnose our inner emotional world. I need to ask yourselves, am I more human or more animal? I need to pay attention to my emotions. Where is my kindness directed to? Who do I feel kind towards? Who do I act kind towards? When I give, am I thinking about myself? Am I thinking about the recipient? Who do I get angry at? What do I get angry about? In other words, we need to take a look at where our feelings are, because feelings don't lie. And after the diagnosis, however it comes out, remember we're just getting started. We've just left Egypt, and we have a long process, 49 days to work on it. So to count the Omer, you look inside, where are my feelings holding? Who do I appreciate? What do I appreciate? I'm willing to spend money on vacation, no problem, but to give a donation, it eats my heart. Or to spend money on a mitzvah, we complain. So what's more important in my eyes? To understand Sphira, we take a look back on what was happening in Egypt. Because what happens is that God took a nation within another nation, right? They ripped the Jewish people out of Egypt after they had sunken in the impurity of Egypt, in the idolatry, in the immorality. in the words of in Deuteronomy, it says that God took a nation within a nation, like Kachas going, and even the Ten Commandments, the very beginning, the very first word, Anoichi, which means I am, right? I am the Lord that God took out of Egypt. It's an Egyptian word. It's not Hebrew, because according to some midrashim, that's what they got used to asking. Other midrashim say no, that the Jews never changed the language of clothing their names. But there's the midrash that says that the first word had to be Egyptian, Arabic, because right, Anach, because that's what the Jews spoke. That's what deep they were into the Egyptian lifestyle and culture. So, as the saying goes, God could take the Jew out of Egypt, but how do you take the Egypt out of the Jew? Right? In other words, somebody's used to think about himself, he's narcissistic, egotistic, selfish. You say, hey, think about God, think about a greater being, think about others besides yourself. This is the real deal. Really changing who we are, what we think, what we feel. But how? That is the story of the Exodus. It's a big deal. The first step was running away. As the Maimonides writes at the beginning of his Haggadah, right, at the Bibhilu, that the Jews had to run in a haste. Right? First step, the alcoholic, we said, take away the bottle. Don't give him psychology and the speech and the guilt trip. First thing is to take him out of his current situation. Same thing, God took us there in a rush. Nothing good was going to come from staying in Egypt and having another speech from Moses. We had to run away. But running away is not marching orders. You can't fight an elephant head on. He's many times your way. So you need step 2, after you run away from the toxicity, and you need to create a new person, change your way of thinking, change your inner world, your values, and make a new person. And this is counting of the Omer, which is step 2. We say, hey, I left Egypt, but where am I? Am I ready to say yes to God and accept the Torah without reading it first? Am I ready to go from barley to wheat, to go from being more animalistic to becoming more human? The difference, what's the difference between an animal and a human being? Animals are great, amazing beings created by God. But an animal only thinks about itself. It's on all fours looking down. We're blessed that God made us on 2 feet with the ability to look up, to think about God, to think about something beyond ourselves. Right? An animal has no education, doesn't have morals, doesn't have... And being an animal means that you only care about yourself. You only look down. The Talmud says famously there's 3 things that humans are like animals, 2 things that we're not. And this is the journey that we're on right now. From barley, animal, to wheat, human. We left Egypt, we're still animalistic, and we slowly refine ourselves, becoming more human. It's a famous story with the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, and somebody, an elder chassid, an elder follower, entered to Yechidus, into a private audience with him, and he said that he used to be very wealthy, and he used to support his children and his grandchildren. Now business is terrible. But he says, I'm not worried about myself. What bothers me is that now I can't help others the way I used to. The Alter Rebbe listened. And then he said, you're talking all about what you need, but not about what you are needed for. And this chassid went white and fainted. Came back to himself, and he took it seriously, and he changed his life. I know for myself, we usually think about the things that we need, but we also have a higher calling about helping others, being there for others, uplifting others. If we're only here for ourselves, then what are we? Who am I? Like it says in Pirkei Avot, Rav Hillel said, if I'm only for myself, then what am I? So this is the lesson from this story, right? Even if you think that you're helping others, are you really helping others, or is it more for you? I'm going to stop here because we're already at 30 minutes. We did not finish the full class. If you want more, you're going to have to contact me directly. Again, this is the weekly Parsha class from Rabbi Trinitsky, Chabad of Newfoundland. Lovely to have you again. Catch you next week.